I guess before I start to share my screen, I'll give you a bit of a background of what I do. So as I said, my name is Anna. I'm a senior occupational therapist here in the LightHouse Arabia, and I am one of the directors of our mental health first aid programs. I work with lots of different children of different ages. I also work with teenagers, and I do a lot of parent work as well. So a lot of what I do is around parent coaching, and that is why most of you are here today, because you are parents and you're ready to learn how you can manage some of the behaviours that you're seeing at home with your children. I will try and make this webinar targeted at all children age and also for teenagers as well. But if anyone has specific questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and I will get back to them at the end. I will just ask that if I happen to answer your question by the end, you can just let me know so I won't spend time on that question. My goal is to talk for 45 to 50 minutes and then leave some time for questions. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to share the screen with you guys now. I'm really excited to be with you, and I really like this topic. It's something that I talk about quite a lot, whether it's in my coaching sessions or when I'm doing webinars such as this one, Behavior Management 101. I hope you guys are ready. I am ready, and I really love presenting. So I do hope that you enjoy this webinar. And I guess my goal is that you feel that your parenting toolbox has expanded, I should say. I don't want to say is full, has expanded by the end of this webinar. So I hope that you all feel that you learned something. Okay, so just to give you a bit of oversight, I know most of you are very familiar with the LightHouse, but for those of you who may not be, we are a mental health and wellness clinic. We're based in Sakim. Okay, beside Spinney's, that direction, if you're familiar with the area. We have lots of different services that I'm happy to answer questions about at the end of the webinar. We're really well known for our psychology services. We also have psychiatry, occupational therapy, that's me, and speech and language therapy. And we cater for all different age groups, from prenatal to children to teens, adults, couples, families and groups as well. We're the only accredited mental health first aid provider in the region. That's the area that I direct in the LightHouse. And I'm happy to answer any questions about our services at the end. But for now, I want to get into why you guys are here today, and that is our agenda. So what am I going to be speaking to you about for the next 45 minutes? First off, we're going to define challenging behaviours, or as I say, behaviours that challenge us. Functions of challenging behaviours. Behaviour as a form of communication. Investigation stage. This is where I want you guys to become your own detectives, take off the parent hat and put on the detective hat. And we're going to finish up with management strategies. So that's the gold of the training. That's the actual takeaways, what you can do. But before I tell you what you can do, you really need to know the underlying reasons why we're seeing these behaviors, and exactly what behavior that you're seeing at home and what is the function of that behavior. Because if you don't know the function of the behavior, you might end up doing a lot of trial and error things with the management strategies. Okay? Defining challenging behaviors. Now, I will start by saying one thing. We often say behaviors that challenge, because we have to be mindful. What challenges you as a parent might not challenge another parent, and vice versa. So a lot of this comes down to parenting. What do you define as behaviors that are difficult in your house? What do you find really easy to manage versus what is a real nightmare for you at home as a parent? All of those things are different. So you need to really be specific when we're talking about the behaviors that we want to change, amend, or improve in the home environment. But what are challenging behaviors? How does the research define them? They are defined as repeated patterns of behaviors that interfere with a child's ability to learn and be engaged in pro-social interactions. Okay, so these are not behaviors that happen once, okay, or even twice. These are behaviors that you're seeing consistently at home, or maybe even teachers are talking about in school, okay? It's not just the home environment, it can be school as well. What are you seeing? Now, this is where I want you guys to tell me. I want you to type into the chat box. What are you guys seeing? Okay, what is, when you think about your household, what are the behaviors that you're struggling with? Okay, please type it into the chat section now. I want to know from you guys. Now, I've put a few things on this slide. Maybe what you're dealing with is here, but maybe it's not. So I have sibling rivalry, meltdowns, low frustration tolerance, crying, or maybe children who are more emotional, or parents who are more emotional, refusal to do any kind of homework or any extracurricular activities, avoidance, oppositional behavior, clinginess, so neediness, maybe separation anxiety, defiance, or tantrums. Okay, now this is not an extensive list. It's just some of the things that I'm seeing in my sessions. Okay, so lots of you typing in. So not listening, low frustration tolerance, refusal to study, meltdowns. Okay, lots of those things in common. Thank you. Please keep adding if you want to. Not accepting the word no, that's a big one. And I'm going to give you a strategy. Remind me at the end to give you a strategy on how we can work on the word no, because this is a big problem. If I don't remember, please remind me and I'll give you a strategy for that. Okay, let's keep going. So what are the consequences of challenging behaviors? So as a result of these behaviors, they interfere with a child's learning, development, and engagement in play. And we know that play and socialization is the primary occupation for our kids. So when their behaviors are getting in the way of that, we're looking at maybe even potential delays in their social emotional development. Other reasons, it may be harmful to the child, peer or parents. So it could be harmful words they're saying. It could be physical aggression. It could be hurting themselves, hurting someone else. Okay, it could be any of those things. It puts a child at risk for later social problems or failure. And I have another slide that will explain that point a little bit better. Difficulties forming friendships, resulting in fewer opportunities to learn and behave well in and be able to really communicate at home or in school or in the community. The last point here is a risk of peer rejection, which can lead to further behavioral problems. Okay, this is a big one. Often we think that these behaviors are just at home, but if a child starts to engage in behaviors that challenge in front of their peers, of course, the natural consequence of that would be that the people around them, whether it's siblings or their friends, may actually not want to engage with them, may not want to play with them. And kids are very black and white. So if they feel that another child is unpredictable with their behaviors, the safest thing for them to do is to avoid. So we don't want that. We want to really work on the underlying behavior so that we can really boost this child's development from every stage: physical, emotional, motor skills, all of those things. So what is the function? What I mean by function is the why. Why is my child behaving this way? I mentioned at the beginning that I need you guys to become detectives, and that's what I'm talking about. What is the function? Here's a list. Social attention. What do I mean by this? That child wants to get acknowledged by someone. Maybe it's you, maybe it's a peer, it's someone. They're doing it for acknowledgement. Communication. They are communicating to you that they're not okay. See that behavior as communication. You see your child, crying on the floor, for example. I want you to ask yourself, what could my child be trying to communicate to me right now? Escape or avoidance. If I don't want to do something and I engage in that behavior, I might get out of it. I have an example coming up, okay? But if I don't want to do my homework and I throw something on the floor and mom and dad say, time out, go to your room, I've won. As a child, I've won. I don't have to do my homework now. The consequence might be that I have no screen time, or I don't, I can't play in the evening. But the main thing that I didn't want to do is my homework, and now I don't have to do it. So avoidance can be a big one, or escape from a task. Sensory processing. Think about that one. Maybe I engage in that behavior because I like how it feels. Maybe I put things into my mouth. Maybe I eat things that I'm not meant to. Maybe I jump up and down and it's really annoying, or I sing or I shout in the back of the car and mom and dad have a headache. But for me, I like that behavior. So why should I stop? That's another reason. Tangible. It gets me something. Okay. Maybe I want food. Maybe I want that toy. Maybe I want my iPad. Is there a tangible reinforcer here that comes into play? Is it self-regulatory in nature? Or maybe is there underlying medical concerns like, I'm not feeling well, I'm sick, I have a pain, I'm confused, and I don't know how to communicate with you what's wrong, so I'm going to cry and scream instead. Okay, so I want you to think for a moment of reflection for you guys. Think about the behavior that I asked you. Think about one behavior that your child or teenager does that really, really bothers you, something that you're really struggling with. And I want you to look through this list and I want you to try and estimate, what do you think it could be? Is it attention? Is it communication? Is it escape? Is it sensory? Is it tangible? Is it self-regulatory, or is it because of an underlying medical reason that might be pain or them feeling unwell? If you don't know, you need to explore these. You need to try and understand, be a detective, and figure out which one of these it is. And it could be more than one, but you really need to know the function of a behavior before we can try and put in strategies. Okay, the strategies that I would give you really depend on why your child engages in this behavior. Put on your detective hat. Does my son or daughter know how to identify their feelings? If your child does not know how to name it, they will not be able to tame it, okay? They need to be able to self-express their emotions. So that's step one, teaching our kids how to name it, okay? Comprehension skills. Do they understand? If I'm a child who does not understand what you're asking me, I am not going to behave in a way that you want me to, because I'm overwhelmed and I'm confused. So we need to look at our kids' developmental age and stage. Are they there yet? Do they understand? Do you need to change how you're communicating to them? Because if that's the case, it's parent work. It's nothing to do with the child. It's how we evolve and we change our expectations and our language skills around that child. Do they have sensory needs? Okay. Are they hyperactive? Do they need more movement? Do they need less movement? Whatever it might be. Could environmental factors be a contributor here? So, and this is a big one. These are the basics. These are the fundamental things that our kids are struggling with in this age and stage that we're in. And that could be things like not getting enough sleep, poor diet, excessive screen time that's really affecting their mood, changes in their routine. This is a big one that I hear from a lot of the parents that I work with. And that will be, we're moving house, or, we're going on holidays, we're going back home for the summer. I hear about it now, but the big time I hear about it, so I'm warning you guys, watch out, is when you come back from holidays, for those of you that are traveling, end of August, September. That's when my phone starts to ring, because really kids will really struggle in trying to shift gears. They were on holidays. They were, not having as much expectations. They were relaxed. There was, minimal structure or routine. And then they come back into school where it's full structure, routine, behavior expectations, lack of movement. They're deprived of all of these things that they've become so accustomed to in the summer. And from my perspective, I think this September is going to be probably the most difficult one to date, because I feel it's really the summer where a lot of people are traveling. They're getting back into that holiday vibe that they missed out on for the last few years. So we are going to have to prepare ourselves to support our kids transition back into school or nursery or whatever they're going back into in September. The next point I have for you guys is behavior as communication. So what is this one about? What is this all about? This is about seeing the behavior as a form of communication. I mentioned this before. What is my child trying to communicate to me right now? But when we talk about communication, it's like a big umbrella. So I'm going to look at under the world of communication and language. So let's have a look at the size of the problem. How important is this? And a lot of parents say to me, Anna, I'm sure they're going to grow out of this. I hear it so much. I think it's just the stage. They're going to grow out of this, or, it's just the pandemic. Always ask yourself, is that the reason that you're putting off working on this behavior? Or is it because you don't have the energy, or you feel that it's just a stage that they're going through? A lot of the time it's not a stage, and often the things that we resist will persist. Okay, so that's something, you need to check it out. It's easy if you have other kids to make a comparison, and say, well, you know what, I don't think that he did that one when he was her age, Or, you know, if you're familiar with developmental milestones, you might be able to understand what's typical and what might be outside of that range. But for those of you maybe who just have one child, it's really hard to make that comparison. So reach out for help, ask. If you don't ask, you won't be able to know. 81% of children with emotional and behavioural disorders have significant unidentified communication needs. Okay, 57% of children diagnosed with language deficits are identified with emotional and behavioral disorders because they cannot or don't have the level of skills that we as adults expect for them to communicate their needs. Children with persistent and severe conduct problems are about 3 times more likely to have low verbal ability than children with low risk of conduct problems. So this is a problem. It is something that we really need to be mindful of and something that we need to address. So what is the direct link between communication and behavior? Understanding. Does my child understand what is being asked of them? And this is a big one for school. And I always speak to teachers and educators about this. It may be less relevant at home because you will know your child. You are the best educator for your child as a parent. You know your child's behaviors. You know every single facial expression that they have. You know when they don't understand, and you know when it's a different kind of behavior. But new teachers that they're going to meet in September are not going to know that. So if a child is feeling overwhelmed, fear of failure, I don't know what you're asking me to do, we may see behaviors that might be classified as challenging. So we need to really understand comprehension level, and you need to communicate with teachers as well. What is the best way for my child to learn? What is their learning style? Expressive language abilities. Can they verbalize what they want to say to you? If your child is hungry, is your child able to say that, or will they just throw themselves on the floor, or, cry or have a tantrum? Okay, what kind of verbal expressive skills do they have? Their memory, their level of concentration and focus, their ability to regulate their emotions. Do they have that cycle, or do they depend on you as an adult to co-regulate with them? Social interactive skills, giving up, physical aggression due to lack of communication, and maybe they don't have the negotiation skills to really understand, how can I problem solve? And most young kids don't have this. We have to remember that those negotiation skills, those problem solving, time management, impulse control, all of those skills are in the frontal lobe. We call them executive functioning skills. And a lot of those skills are still developing. Even with teenagers, they're still developing. So always ask yourself, is my child really just trying to make my day really difficult today? Or maybe they actually cannot control this behavior. In that case, I can give as many consequences as I want as a parent, but it's not going to help my child. So teach your kids. Support them. I always tell the parents that I work with, sometimes you have to let your child borrow your frontal lobe and really go through the problem solving phase with them. Label their emotion, help them manage, problem solve, reflect. Those are all things that we have to do with our kids. We cannot expect them to do it themselves. We have years of experience and knowledge and feedback. We've gone through all that. It's so easy for us to know that's not a good decision. That's going to get me fired. That's going to make my partner fall out with me this evening. We know those things because we can draw on our executive functioning skills, but our kids don't have those. So we really need to be mindful, slow down, and be patient. The last point there is difficulty with transitions. Some kids really struggle to move from one activity to the next. How many of you can relate to me here? If you say to your child, okay, it's 8 p.m. or whatever time is bedtime in your house, it's time to go to bed. And then you hear the explosions. I'm not going, it's too late, 5 more minutes. Some kids really struggle with transitions. And there are so many things that you can do to work on that. It doesn't mean that you're being a pushover as a parent. It doesn't mean that you're being super flexible. Often it's just the language that we use. It's about preparing our kids ahead of time so that they don't feel like you are pulling something from under them and they're falling down. It's often just about changing small changes to our approach as parenting and how we communicate with our kids. Here's an examples of some of the underlying reasons from our kids' perspective. I don't understand what you want me to do. I can't understand my feelings or anything about them or do anything about them. This work is too difficult for me. I'm struggling. I'm embarrassed because I don't know what to do and the rest of my friends are here. I'm in a fight again and I don't know how to make it better. I can't explain to you what I'm trying to say. I know you don't understand me and it's making me very anxious right now. Okay, it's that level of I am struggling and I don't know how to tell you, so I'm just going to engage in this behavior. Sensory processing. Now, this is something that I specialize in. And I guess with sensory processing, some of you guys might be familiar with this. Some of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about right now, and that's okay. Sensory processing is basically how all of our sensory systems work. Okay, so think about all the senses that you have: sense of movement, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of body awareness, all of those things. And this pyramid will explain it quite well. Our sensory systems are at the bottom of the learning pyramid. Okay, they're one of the first things that a child learns even before birth. These things are developing. So their sense of smell, their sense of vision, their sense of hearing, their sense of taste, touch, movement, and body awareness. All of those things are developing. Those things are directly related to how a child can self-regulate. Okay, so if I'm familiar with where my body is in space, how my body perceives and takes in all of the different stimulation from my everyday environment, I'm able to process, I'm able to understand, and I'm able to create an output with my body, right? I'm able to respond in an appropriate way to my environment. But when a child has underlying difficulties in any of those areas, we are going to see difficulties at the top of the pyramid. We're going to see difficulties in academics, in behavior, in impulse control. Okay, we might have a child who is not able to manage in a busy mall, who is not able to manage in a noisy birthday party, who is not able to cope with you changing what's on the menu for dinner tonight. Any of those things are not working underneath smoothly. We are going to see different difficulties at the top. So I can give you guys strategies to manage behaviors. Okay, I can give you the applied behavior analysis strategies. But if there are underlying sensory needs, I'm really just giving short-term solutions, and those underlying concerns are going to come up and up again in the future. So it is really important that we rule out any kind of underlying sensory concerns. Here's the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown, okay? Now, when I talk about meltdown, I'm talking about sensory processing. A tantrum is very different. A tantrum is ABCs of behavior. So let's have a look at a tantrum first. A tantrum is behavioral. Children are choosing how to behave. There is control there. A tantrum is for attention. Children will watch to see you watching them, okay? So if your child is having this, outburst in their bedroom and you walk by and you hear them and you say, well, I'm not there, there's no one else in the room, it's more than likely not a tantrum, it's sensory. Okay, because you will be there or someone will be there when they're having a tantrum. A tantrum will stop when you give in. Okay, when you say, fine, 5 more minutes on the iPad, or okay, you can have that chocolate bar, the tantrum will stop. That behavior will reduce and eventually stop. A tantrum will not hurt a child. Children will not physically hurt themselves with a tantrum. Whereas a sensory meltdown is something that looks very different. With a sensory meltdown, it is neurological. Children cannot control it. Even children that I work with will feel very upset with themselves after this behavior. They might be emotional. They might feel guilty. They might be so frustrated with themselves. It can even affect their self-esteem because they could not control that themselves in the moment. A meltdown, they don't care who's watching. They don't care if there's anybody there. A meltdown will not end if you give in or you give them something. Children will not stop even if you give them exactly what they want. A meltdown can turn dangerous, meaning the children can self-harm or even accidentally hurt themselves. Self-regulation, okay? So here is where we really come on to the toolbox, the strategies that I want you guys to add to your parenting toolbox. We've gone through the detective stage. We've gone through some of the rationale, the underlining behavior as communication. Now it's on to the gold, as I mentioned before, and that is self-regulation and what you guys can do as parents. What is self-regulation? Self-regulation is the ability to understand and manage your behavior and your reaction to feelings and things that are happening around you. Okay? It includes regulating your reactions to emotions like frustration, excitement, all of those things. Calming yourself down after something exciting or upsetting happens. Focusing on a task, showing that you can attend to something. Refocusing your attention onto something else. Controlling your impulses, okay? You want to take something, you want to say something, you know, your boss turns around to you and says something and you have something to say, but you know, I cannot call my boss that name. I'm going to get fired if I do that, okay? We have that ability to control the thoughts, think it or say it, filtering our language, filtering our thoughts. Us adults, most of us have that control. Maybe our kids don't have that ability to control. Young kids don't have it. They're not meant to. Learn behavior that helps you get along with other people and fit into an environment and engage in the behaviors that are expected in that environment. So what do I want you to do? First thing in your toolbox is data collection. Now, I put this in here because I think it's very basic. It is a behavioral strategy that many psychologists use. I use it in my therapy a lot, and it's called ABCs of behavior. Okay, it's easy to remember, ABCs of behavior. When you are looking at a behavior, you need to understand the antecedent. That's what happens before. Okay, so what happened before my child started engaging in that behavior? So that could be, I told my child to go to bed. I asked them to do their homework. It could be they were swimming. Anything that happened before. It could be a directive that you gave them. It could be something their sibling did. It could be the time of the day. It could be anything. But it's whatever happened before the behavior. It's called the antecedent. The second point here is B. B is the behavior. What does the behavior look like? In black and white terms. For example, my child bit their brother. My child threw something on the floor. My child cursed at me. My child cried. My child grabbed me, threw their toys on the floor, banged the door, threw the food off the table, you name it. The behavior is actually what it looks like. C is the consequence. What happened after? Okay. I put my child into timeout. I shouted back at my child. I put my child in their room. I sat down with my child and tried to regulate them. I did problem solving, anything. But the thing is, in order for us to change the B, the behavior, we have to change one of the top or the bottom. We got to change the A or the C. That's how it works. That's black and white behavior management. If I want to change the behavior, either the antecedent needs to change, so maybe the directive, for example, or the consequence needs to change, because one of these factors is going to reinforce the behavior. Maybe the antecedent, the A, is the trigger for your child. Someone said at the start, when I say no to my child, that's the antecedent. If your child says, Dad, can I have iPad? And you say, no. No is the antecedent, okay? No is the trigger. No switches a switch in my child's brain and says, I'm really upset right now. I'm going to make sure that you know about it. What happens as a consequence is up to you. Okay, that's how it works. But sometimes changing the A can be as simple as you saying to your child, honey, you are going to have the iPad, but first I need you to clean up all your toys. Or it could be, yes, you can have the iPad. You can have it at 6 p.m., but we're doing something else now. Okay? Or it could be, unfortunately, our iPad time is gone today, but you are going to have your time again in the morning. Try it, because you avoiding saying that triggering word no can mean that the behavior might be less intense, or maybe you're not even going to see that behavior. But remember, for kids, the word no and don't, or at least, can be the biggest triggers. It doesn't even matter what you say after that. Those words can be enough to instigate the behavior. Here's another example for you. Antecedent A. You ask your son or your daughter to pack their suitcase. Okay, so I put that in for you because I know a lot of people are traveling. You ask your son or your daughter to pack their suitcase. Behavior. Your son or your daughter shouts and throws their clothes on the floor. The consequence is you send your son or your daughter to timeout. Do you think, okay, antecedent, there's nothing wrong with that. Behavior, also nothing wrong with that really. From a child's perspective, they're reacting. Consequence here is where the problem is. You send your son or your daughter for timeout. What did your child want? Your child did not want to pack their suitcase. You sent them to timeout. So you gave them a golden ticket. You said, okay, you don't have to do it anymore. You can go and stand over there. Your child might prefer standing over there for 10 minutes than packing their suitcase. They have escaped the task. You have reinforced that behavior, maybe unconsciously, but you have said to your child, anytime that you want to get out of a task, just throw something and I'm going to send you to timeout and you're not going to have to do it anymore. So I want you to think about it like that. Okay, I hope that's clear. I want you guys to be detectives and understand, is my consequence diminishing the behavior or actually escalating the behavior, making it more likely to happen again in the future? So what are my key tips? And here's where I start. The first one is parenting is an inside job. Okay, inside job. That's really important here. Parenting is an inside job. It starts with you. Okay, before I go into I would say validating you guys as parents, and I really mean this. If you can take away this from today's webinar, take it away. This is the one thing I want you guys to remember. If you or your partner, okay, if you have a partner, have difficulty regulating your emotions, don't expect your child to be any different. Okay, you are the thermostat in your house. If you are feeling too high and your temperature is up, your kids will naturally be up, okay? If you shout at your child when they do something wrong, never expect your child not to shout when something goes wrong in their life. You are a mirror for them. Even if you feel that your kids don't see you arguing with your partner or speaking to someone on the phone with a raised voice or inappropriately, they will always do what you do. So it always starts with you, always. If you cannot regulate your emotions, do not expect your kids to be able to regulate their emotions. It's the black and white rule for parenting, okay? Think about it. Think about it like this. Often parents will come to me and say, you know, Anna, my child doesn't know how to regulate. And I'm like, how do you regulate as a parent? And the parent will say to me, well, you know, sometimes I'm a bit hot-headed. You know, we do have a few arguments at home. My work is very stressful. Sometimes she sees me being a little bit loud or whatever. And I say, okay, that's fine. That's a normal house. But what happens after? And the parent will tell me, well, you know, usually, Anna, I realize that one of the kids is there. So, you know, I move into a different room, or I change, or I ask them to leave. Okay. What happens here? What you're doing as a parent is you're creating a story for your child. And the story is, I'm really angry. I'm shouting at someone on the phone. And then you go into the other room and I come back out and I'm fine. So your child believes in this kind of magic thing, like mom was really annoyed, dad was really angry, but then they disappeared and they came back happy. Your child never got to see you problem solving, talking it through, apologizing maybe, saying you were sorry, reflecting and saying, I really shouldn't have said that, or maybe I'm really tired today, maybe I'm hungry. And you regulate because you're an adult. But your child often has all of these fragmented parts of the story and puts them together, and that's what they believe is self-regulation. So I ask you guys as parents, allow your kids to see how you regulate in a developmentally, appropriate way. Like, allow your kids to see you blowing at someone in traffic and, you know, shouting with having a bit of road rage if that's you. But also allow them to look to see you saying to yourself, you know, I shouldn't have done that. I think I'm really tired today. You know, I think I need to take some deep breaths. I think that I need to apologize. I think that's what I need to do. What would you do? You know, allow your kids to be able to see that realistic view of life where they can identify problems, they can manage them, and they can come out with a more appropriate way to solve their problems. I hope that's clear. So parenting is an inside job. When you've done that I've just mentioned, when you've learned to identify your own regulation needs, I want you to be self-compassionate with yourselves. You're doing your very best. I work with parents every day, and so much parents feel so guilty. Maybe they feel like they don't have enough time with their kids. They don't have quality play. They don't have enough to give to them. Maybe they're not their best self in front of them, but you need to go easy on yourself. You cannot give to your kids what you do not give to yourself. So if you are not looking after your own mental health, you cannot look after your child's mental health and their emotional regulation. You just can't do it. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So you need to prioritize yourself first. Okay, now don't tell me you don't have time. The first thing that a parent will tell me is, Anna, I'm so busy with the kids, I don't have time for myself. You need to carve out the time for you. Even if it's 5 minutes longer you stay in the shower in the morning, or that you get to hand over the kids to someone at home for 20 minutes in the evening, you need to give to yourself first, because unless you are able to regulate, process, check in with yourself, you will not really be able to be the best parent that you can be. So that's what I would say there. Learn about your style of regulation. If you cannot self-regulate, learn how to. Some of the key activities that I tell the adults I work with to really tap into how you are feeling right now are things like meditation, journal writing, insight-oriented therapy, and just having solitude, quiet time away for yourself as an adult. A lot of people tell me and feel that if I'm by myself, I'm lonely. Loneliness has nothing to do with solitude. Solitude and being bored, let's say, are the most powerful things that you can do for yourself. That's the thing that will allow you to process what's going on in your life as a parent, as someone who's working, as someone who's probably wearing so many different hats in life. You need to have quiet time where you're doing nothing. Next thing, behavior management for your kids. I would say all attention is good attention. I always say this, whatever you give attention to will increase, okay? For example, if your child has their feet up on the couch and they're not allowed, and you say to your child, put your feet down, you're giving attention to that behavior. I guarantee you, your child will keep their feet up on the couch for longer, okay? If your child is poking their sister and annoying them and teasing them, and you don't say anything for the duration of their play, but then you say, Harrison, stop poking your sister, you are giving attention to a behavior. That behavior will increase. What you should be doing is saying, Harrison, I love how you're playing so nicely with your sister. Get in there before the behavior happens. If you give more attention to the behaviors that you want to see, those behaviors will happen more frequently. And as parents, we forget, you know, our kids are sitting nicely in the back of the car on the way home from school, and we kind of think, good, we have some quiet time. How many of you comment on that? How many of you will actually say, wow, nice sitting, guys. I love how quiet you're being. Or nice playing with your sister. Nice using your hands. Thank you for waiting for me before you started eating. Thank you for doing your homework. How many of you pay attention to the everyday behaviors that we expect? Those are the things that I ask you to give more attention to. Okay? Be kind. Be gentle, but be firm. That's how we do it. That's what I do in therapy. I'm kind, I'm gentle, but I'm firm. Be consistent, but don't be too rigid, okay? If you say no to your child, okay? If you say, I'm sorry, iPad time has finished, and your child starts to scream or beg you, and you turn around to your child and you say, all right, 2 more minutes, you are wrong. Don't ever expect your child to listen to you if you are flexible like that. Because what you're indirectly saying to your kids are, the first time I say no, it doesn't really mean anything. The more that you engage in that shouting behavior, eventually I'm going to give in. Okay? That's called the escalation trap. You say no, your child starts to increase their behavior, increase. Eventually, you lose it, you flip your lid and you say, fine, do it. You've taught your child that as long as I keep going, eventually mom or dad is going to cave and I'm going to get what I want. Whereas when you say no and you are consistent, okay, when you are consistent, the behaviors will get worse. Okay, they will get worse, but the behaviors will eventually go back down and they will get better. And all you need to do as a parent, no matter what kind of day you've had with your kids, is ask yourself before you get into bed, was I consistent today? If the answer is yes, you've done your job. Even if you've seen the worst behaviors at home, that's okay. Behaviors are behaviors. As long as you can say, I didn't lose it, I regulated, I followed what that woman Anna told me, and I was consistent, you've done a good job. These things take time, okay? I mentioned the extinction burst. That's what happens, okay? It's always going to get worse before it gets better when we're implementing new strategies at home. And I'll give you an example that one of the parents gave me during the week, okay? So she said to me, Anna, it's really difficult because she has boys. I think 2 boys and 1 girl. And she said, nobody listens to me at home. Like, you know, I'm in making the dinner and I call them and nobody comes. I call them again, no one comes. So I walk out into the living room and I shout, and then they all run to the dinner table. But I told her, your kids are doing what you've taught them. If you kept cooking and you stayed in that room and you kept calling them and no one came, you've indirectly taught your children the only time that mom or dad are really serious about something is when they shout. So that shouldn't be the case. The first time that you walk into that room and say, everybody, it's dinner time, 3, 2, 1, let's go. You wait there until they're in, and that behavior will then become more consistent. Okay, I hope that's clear. 5 key steps that I'm going to finish with as kind of a summary as to how we can manage these behaviors are here on this page. Number 1, be aware of your child's emotions and yours. Remember, it starts with you. Recognize their emotion as an opportunity to teach. Listen with empathy. We're always validating our kids' behaviors. Remember that. Always validate your kids' behaviors. This does not mean feelings. This does not mean that you're validating the behaviors. You're just validating how they feel. Help your child to find the words to label their emotions and set limits while you are exploring strategies to solve the problem. Okay, be aware. Think before you act. Why did my child do this? Detective hat on. Ask yourself, before you dive into that ocean of emotions, ask yourself, can I swim here? Do I know what's really going on? What lesson am I trying to teach to my child? My advice to you as a parent would be, if you are feeling overwhelmed today, if you feel stressed, if you finish school this week and you are done with the week and you just feel that you cannot go in and be that positive parent, don't do it. Because if you're going to dive in and you're going to flip your lid, you're going to lose your cool, you could actually do more damage in the future. So pick your battles and get support if you have some at home. Next, recognize the opportunity. If we see anger, we need to see it as an opportunity to teach emotional regulation skills, teach our kids to label their anger and to manage their level of frustration. If we're looking at sibling rivalry, this is social communication. Okay, this is emotional intelligence skills that we're going to build on. It's an amazing opportunity to teach our kids how to problem solve. How do we listen and validate? Acknowledge their feelings, even if you don't agree with the feeling or behavior. If your child is saying to you, you know, Mom, Dad, I'm so angry right now that she took my toy. I don't want to go on holidays. I don't want to move house. I don't want to eat that broccoli. Okay, validate the feelings. The biggest mistake that parents make is that they say, there's no need to feel that way. Don't be silly. Why would you say that? That's really invalidating and will never give you the answer that you want. Whereas if you go in and say, Oh, I'm so sorry that you don't like that. I'm so sorry that you're angry. That must be really difficult for you. Tell me more about why you're feeling that way. If your child feels that you believe them, step one is done. Okay? Always validate the feelings. It does not mean that you're giving in or you're validating the behaviors. Okay? You might still make them do whatever you've asked them to do, but you are validating the behaviors, and your child will naturally be more regulated when they feel that you are listening to them. Help your child find words to label their feelings, okay? If your child is very young, you might say, well, it sounds to me like maybe you're tired because, and you can talk about that. Or it seems to me that maybe you're sad because you weren't invited to the birthday party tomorrow. So really support your child in linking situations and scenarios to feelings. Name it to tame it. I mentioned this at the start. Remember, if our kids do not know how to name their emotions, they will not be able to tame them. If your child is annoyed and angry at their sibling, you might say, I know your brother can really upset you sometimes. If your child is frustrated and angry during homework time, you might say, I know this homework is so frustrating. I really bet that you just want it to be over. But you know what? This is something that I can help you with, and we got to do it, but maybe we can have some fun after. Okay, if your child is feeling anxious about a new activity, you might say, sounds like you're feeling nervous about going to football practice tonight. I understand. I find it really difficult when I have to do new things. Okay, you're relating to them and you're validating them. If your child is feeling sad about not seeing their grandparents, you might say, it's so hard that we cannot see our grandma and grandpa right now. I know you miss them. I miss them too. What do you think we could do about this? Okay, just examples to give you guys. Setting limits and problem solving. Always be curious. I'll say it again for the last time. You are a detective. Take off the parenting hat, put on your detective hat, or wear both if you can manage that, and be curious and try and understand what is the function of this behavior. Have age-appropriate explanations ready for your kids. So if you have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, for example, you're not going to speak to the both of them together. You're going to have very different conversations that are more tailored to their age and developmental stage. Remember that all attention is good attention. Use it wisely. Be consistent, but not rigid. As I said, be gentle and firm. Extinction bursts will happen. So if you're trying to change a behavior, be mindful that it might get worse before it gets better. Pause and problem solve. Pause and name the problem. I see that you're having a really hard time sharing with your brother. For siblings, as I said, conduct their own meetings and let them present a solution to you. Often, and we call this snow, what do we call it? Snow plowing parenting, where there's a problem with 2 kids or 3 kids or 5, however many you have. You hear the problem from the next room, you go in, you separate the kids, and it's kind of like a snow plow. You just get rid of the problem, and you never really teach your kids how to problem solve. Allow your kids to learn to argue. The only time that you should be really stepping in is if you really feel that they're getting nowhere. You might make suggestions, or if it becomes physical or unsafe, then you might step in. But they need to learn how to problem solve and fall back down and get back up again with better solutions. And I mean fall down from an emotional perspective, not from a physical perspective, okay? Or think through the problem together and try and solve it. Remember, only step in when you have to. Problem solving examples, think out loud, as I mentioned. Ask for advice, don't immediately have the answer. Snow plowing, as I said. How could we work this out together to solve it? What do you think would happen if, did that work out for you the way you wanted it to? How did that work out for you? What will you do the next time this happens? What will you learn? Was it easy? Was it hard? What would you do differently next time? So they're all different kind of areas to problem solve. Questions and comments. Okay, I was speeding up a bit at the end, guys. I was conscious of time, but we're good for time. I have it's 2:50 now, so we have 10 minutes. I really want to hear from you guys. Please feel free to write your questions or comments in the Q&A section or the chat section. In case any of you had to go, I'm going to stay on, but I really hope that you enjoyed. I hope that was beneficial for you. If you have any questions that I can answer, please feel free to ask me. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So please do give us feedback if you enjoyed the webinar. If you didn't, what else you want to hear from us. We really love hearing your feedback so that we can continue these kinds of webinars and also increase the amount of topics that we're working on for you guys. So we'd love to hear that. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few moments to put any questions that you have into the Q&A box or the chat. I'll check both and I'll try and answer those as best as I can. Some of you saying thank you to me. You're most welcome. I'm happy that you enjoyed. You're most welcome. Okay, let's have a look at this. Someone said it's called ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. Yes, so ABA has many different strategies. We use lots of different things depending on what behavior we're working with. I'm ABA trained, that's why I use some of those examples. What would be an appropriate consequence to that scenario? Okay, if you can just let me know which scenario. Oh, you already did. The scenario where your child doesn't want to pack or do a chore. Okay, good one. I think often it's about how we ask our kids. And often what I do is, if your child knows their routine ahead of time, they're going to be much more willing to engage. But often what happens is we spring these things on our kids suddenly and they're not ready. If your child is in the middle of playing a game or they're resting in their room and you come in and ask them to do something, it might just be too overwhelming and they may impulsively respond to you. So the first thing that I would say is clearly identify what's going to happen. So you might say to your kids in the morning, okay, guys, this is what we're doing today. First you have swimming, then we're going to do this at 4 p.m. or after school or whatever language you use. We're all going to pack our suitcases together. Okay, that's what we're doing. Ask your child to repeat it back to you. What are we doing after school? If your child is more aware of what's going on, when you ask them then after school, they're going to be more willing to engage in it. That would be the first tip I would give you. The second thing is, if your child really struggles with these things, I would always use, and this is my go-to strategy in therapy, and I call it a first then schedule. Some people call it a now next schedule. And basically what I'll say to a child is, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And they'll pick something. I want to play. I want to use that toy. I want to talk to you. I want to be with whatever. And I'll say, okay, I can do that. But first, I want you to pack your suitcase. Okay? But first, we're going to do nice reading on the floor. And then we're going to play that game. So we call it a first then schedule, because if your child has access to everything that they love to do at home, why would they want to do something that they don't want to do? It doesn't make any sense, okay, from their perspective. But if my child knows that if I do this for mom or dad, something fun is on the way, they're going to be happy. They're going to be much more willing to engage because the motivation is there. I know if I help if I help mom or dad pack my suitcase, that I'm going to get to play with my toys after. It's much more reinforcing for them. I hope that answers your question. Someone has said, it was really awesome and had many things to give a thought from now onwards. Please do share with me the recording. Absolutely, we'll share the recording with you. And you're most welcome. I'm so happy that you enjoyed. Can you recommend any strategy for a child who has tactile sensory sensitivities? I would say the first question I would ask is, make sure that it is tactile sensitivities. I would ask you, if it's sensory processing, have you done a sensory profile? Have you checked in with a therapist, a sensory specialist? That would be really important. There are many different strategies, and it really depends on, first, what are the barriers of this sensitivity? For example, sometimes with tactile sensitivities, it could be play, like maybe your child doesn't want to touch certain things that are developmentally maybe important for them, like different sensations, Play-Doh, all of those messy play things, which are really good for development. It could be a lot of the things that I would see in the kids I work with tactile sensitivities are picky eaters. They can be big picky eaters because they don't like specific textures of foods. And then it can be with clothing either. So like they don't like specific textures, they don't like labels, all of those kind of things. Often what we do is we ask ourselves first, what's a barrier? So how can we be flexible? Can my child engage in life appropriately and have the best quality of life without doing these things? That's what you need to ask yourself. If you're trying to make your child wear, I don't know, wool t-shirts, let's say, do they have to? Is it something that you can do? If my child hates labels on their clothes, can I just cut off the labels? If your answer is yes, that might be your first strategy. If it's something that, you know, they want to overcome, they need to overcome, then what I would do is what we call almost like graded exposure. So if you can imagine a stairs, and the thing that you want your child to do is at the top of the stairs and they're at the bottom, it's about gradually exposing them to the thing. The more that we gradually expose them to the things that they don't like, the more their sensory system becomes more tolerant of those things. Okay, I'll give you a quick example because I could speak to you about this question for hours. But let's say my child really doesn't like slime, okay, goo, it's wet. This is probably one of the most difficult things for a child with sensitivities sometimes to touch. So instead of me giving them little pieces of slime, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start off with something that doesn't stick on their skin and they don't like, but they're not very sensitive to. So it might be a bowl of rice. I'm going to play and find different animals and letters in rice. When they're more comfortable with that, I might start to move into more of a wetter texture. So it could be things like Play-Doh, it could be dough, it could be cooking, it could be gardening, those kind of things. All with their preferred toys. Has to be around something that they love to do so that we are pairing the non-preferred with the preferred. And then gradually, as my child becomes more tolerant, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start slowly bringing in some of that slime or whatever it might be. So that's called graded exposure. I hope that answers your question. It's so brief. I could talk for hours about that sensory difficulties, but I hope that's helpful. But I would check in with a specialist so that they can really assess and give you a specific sensory plan, because sensory strategies are so individualized and what works for one child might not work for the others. Next question I have, especially when I'm at work, I give the instruction, my child doesn't follow through and waits till I lose my temper. Okay, that's really about consistency, okay? And often I'll use the first then schedule. First, do this, then you can have this. You have access to what they want. If they refuse and say no, you say, okay, no problem. You don't want to clean your room? You're not having your iPad. The minute you're ready to start cleaning your room, I'm going to give it to you. But remember, make sure that the directions that you're giving your kids are actually easy at the beginning. If I send my kids into the room and say, you know, clean the room, and the room is a mess, they're going to give up. It's too much. I need to set my kids up for success. So I need to say, you know, have the smallest mess available for them and say, the minute you clean that up, I'm going to give you whatever you want. It's easy for them. The kids are going to be like, okay, Anna, I'll do this. But they know that I am going to stick to my word and be consistent and give them what they want. Okay, so I've taught my kids, if you listen to my directions, you will get what you want. And this is what parents often forget. They give their kids the biggest instruction. The kids are like, this is too much. So start small, even things that are easy for them. And then as they start to become more compliant and listen to you, then you can increase the expectation. Okay, I'm going to go over to the Q&A box. I know we're just out of time, but I'm going to stay on for an extra few minutes. I will answer as many questions as I can before my next client comes. So stay with me if you can. How can we handle it when there are complaints from the school about a child having physical altercations with his peers? This is a difficult one. I think, you know, it's about teaming up with the school. It's understanding. I would say a key thing here would be involving the school counsellor. Most schools here, I think every school has a school counsellor, but we really need to get to the bottom of the physical aggression because, you know, often people just say anger. It's not just anger. Anger is an iceberg. If you imagine an iceberg with anger being that very top of it, under anger, there could be anything going on with the child: low self-esteem, frustration, sadness, stress, anxiety, peer rejection. It could be anything. Maybe they're anything. So it's important that we understand why my child is engaging in physical altercations at school. School counselor can help. If the school counselor can't, I definitely recommend checking in with a therapist who might be able to look at the underlying reasons, because we need to understand the function of this anger before we can change. And the school can really help with that as well. I hope that answers your question. Some of you saying, thank you, you're most welcome. In the scenario that the child has low grades in academics, we have banned him or her for some time with his gadgets or anything that distracts him or her. Is that a right way? That's a good question. I would say it really depends, and it goes a lot down to parenting. You know, it's about working with your child. If your child is really struggling with their academics, and you take things away from them and take things, maybe the only things that can help them get through that study, it could actually be worse for them. There has to be a balance, but there has to be an awareness. Why is my child not performing well? Is it their level? Is it that the tasks are too difficult for them, that they're struggling in class? Because then we need to be a lot more accommodating. We need to set them up for success. Is it that my child has huge potential academically, but absolutely loves gaming and cannot get off the PS every day? Then I might say, okay, we need to reduce screen time. But I'm not saying, you know, hold the screen time, because this, as you know, as a parent, can give you more behaviors than before. But what I might say is, you know, we need to prioritize study. I'm not going to take away your game or your screen from you, but what I am going to do is, me and your father are going to recommend that study comes first. We spoke to the school. They said on average you should be doing an hour and a half a day. So once you have that done, you can have access to your game. Don't expect your kids to do it the other way around. If they come home from school and they pull out the iPad or the PS, you know, they're never going to want to study. It's the same for adults. If I'm watching Netflix, if I go home and watch Netflix and then, you know, 9 p.m. comes and I say, oh, I've got to do my clinical admin, I have no motivation to do it. Whereas I know if I go home and say, I need to answer these people today from the webinar, I need to respond to my emails, I need to get through my tasks, I know that I have something to look forward to after. So I'm going to be more productive in it. I hope that answers your question. Let me see what else I have here. We have a misbehave. I'm not sure what this question is. Let me just check. Can I understand first? How can we drive it back to the normal way? I'm not sure I understand this question. I think if your child was behaving in a specific way and then their behavior has changed, what I would say is you need to understand what's brought about this change. Is it a change in family? Is it the change in routine? Is it the change in summer? You really need to ask yourself what's bringing about the change. Changes are something that we need to look out for as parents, because changes in behaviors are something that we need to be very mindful of. When we look at mental health difficulties with kids, okay, the biggest thing that you can look out for is a change in their behavior. Things like no longer enjoying the things that they once took pleasure in, you know, maybe not being as social, not being as expressive, you know, change in their mood, their diet, their sleeping patterns. Those are times when we really need to be a detective. We need to understand what's causing this behavior. If you're struggling as a parent to really come to the bottom of it, please reach out and get some support so that we can help you and your kids as well. How can I make my 4-year-old child confess, tell the truth if they're involved in something that happened at school? This is such a good question, and I'm asked this by parents probably like twice a week minimum. The thing is, kids are very impulsive, okay? They know that if they tell the truth sometimes, especially at 4 years old, there's going to be a consequence. They're going to get in trouble. So often, you know, you'll say, did you do that? And they'll say no, because they know if they say yes, that you're going to, you know, discipline them maybe or give them a consequence. So you need to change your parenting. You need to actually teach your child that I value, as a parent, I value honesty most. Honesty is so important for me. And that is about sitting with your child, explaining what the truth means, explaining what the consequences are lying, validating them, and explaining to your child, you know, you're not going to get in trouble if you tell me the truth. Of course, if you keep doing that behavior, there might be a consequence. But the most important thing is when I ask you what happened in school, that you're honest with me, because if you're honest with me, it means together we can solve the problem and I can teach you why that was wrong. But if you don't tell me the truth, the consequence is probably going to be bigger, because I'm going to be really sad if I know that you are not telling the truth. Something that I do with very young kids is, because they're so impulsive that they'll say, it wasn't me, they'll lie very fast. I'll teach them, I'll say, sometimes I lie. I'll try and relate to them. I'll say, sometimes it's really hard to tell the truth. So, what we're going to practice today is that if you say something that's not the truth, I want you to say a fun word after. So let's create a word that lets me know that you're not telling the truth, and then you'll never get in trouble when you say that word, or even, at least at the beginning, until they start to be more honest with you. So for example, this week the word with one of the kids that I work with was fuzzy. So he has a problem that every time mom and dad ask him something, he'll say, it wasn't me, no. And then he gets so into his lie that he knows he can't get out of it. So what we've taught him is to say, it wasn't me. And then mom and dad will say, is that fuzzy or is that the truth? And sometimes now he will say fuzzy. So immediately what parents are doing is saying, I'm so happy that you told me that you told me the truth. That means so much to me that you told me the truth. And they're reinforcing, remember what I said, give more attention to the behaviors that you want to see. And that's what we're going to see more of our kids engaging in. It doesn't mean that there'll never be a consequence. It means that at the beginning, you need to get your kids to tell you the truth, build the trust in them. And then as you go on, you can set the consequences if the behavior continues. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I'm done with all the questions from the Q&A. I'm going to get to one or two more questions in the chat. There's so many questions, so I'm sorry. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need anything from me after the training, if I didn't answer your question. Okay, I'm going to just go to the very bottom and randomly pick one. Can parents assume roles such as the good cop and the bad cop? Let me see this question. Where is it gone? Yes. Strict is more appropriate with their children, not to the point of instilling fear in them, but rather to keep their behavior patterns in good check. What I would say here is it's really important that mom and dad are on the same page with certain parenting styles. Because the thing is, what happens, and I see this all the time, where mom and dad have very different views, or they have very different kinds of consequences or behavioral management. And what we'll teach our kids is there's certain things that I can do in front of mom, certain things I can do in front of dad, and even, what a child said to me this week? Dad is such a pushover. That's what a really young child said to me. So he said, I know I can't do those things in front of dad, but or in front of mom, but dad is fine. And it's so confusing for a child, and it's really confusing for you as a parent, and it actually causes parental rivalry as well. So I would say is try and get on the same page, have your family values consistent. But I would say it's not about being really strict. It's about being firm but kind. You still need to show your kids empathy. You still need to be able to say, I'm sorry, talk to me about that. I'm here, I love you, I want to listen to you. Because you don't want to become so strict or firm that your child feels like if something is wrong with me, with my mental health or my emotions, I can't go to that parent, because they won't be vulnerable with me. They won't show me empathy. They're black and white, and it's just going to be a firm yes or no. So you can be firm, but you need to also have a window of learning and be vulnerable with your child, so they know that they can connect with you, and they can really regulate with you. I hope that answers your question. Okay, that's it, guys. That's all I have time for. Apologies to you if I didn't get to answer your question. Thank you so much for being with me today. A pleasure having you. We had such a big group today, which was so nice, and we ran a bit over. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you have a lovely Eid weekend, and yes, I hope I get to see you guys at some stage in the future. Thank you from my side. It was a pleasure, and I hope that you enjoyed. Please give us feedback if you did enjoy or you didn't. We always really appreciate the feedback that we get from you guys. So thank you. See you.